Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse every Thursday and share it as the Madlik podcast on your favorite platform. This week's Parsha is Vayechi. As we complete the book of Genesis, we look at a few verses that have been interpreted by both Jewish and Christian, and I would say Muslim exegetes, and explore how these commentaries may have been in a conversation rather than a polemic. In the process, and without ignoring the divisive nature of religion, we wonder at the power of Scripture and the potential for religion to bring us together. So join us for Until Shiloh Comes. So welcome, Rabbi. Usually before we start, we go over what did you do in your week? Or in this case, what did you do over the Christmas vacation? But I save that for the podcast because I don't know about you, Rabbi, but when I was in the yeshiva, on Christmas night and Christmas Day, we didn't learn. We didn't want to give zechut. We didn't want to give credence. We didn't want to give brownie points to Jesus, to Christianity, and learn on that day. So there was some that would actually tear the toilet paper for the rest of the year for Shabbat.
That's funny, right? That's very funny.
And it was called Nittel Nacht. I don't know, Nittel, is Nittel mean?
Nobody knows. I want to tell you something. Nobody knows where that phrase comes from. But that's what it's called. Christmas Eve is called Nittelnacht.
So I got an email a week or two before Christmas from an organization called Torah on the Move. Is that what it is? Torah
in Motion.
Torah in Motion. And you are one of their scholars. And you've actually
I am.
You gave a
they had
course
an
on
amazing they had an amazing Christmas Day program.
So it's called a Yom Iyun, a day of like focus and depth. And it was called Judaism Encounters the World, December 25th, online Yom Iyun. So yours truly I made a contribution, and I had nothing else to do on Christmas morning. So there was no tree, there were no presents to unwrap. So I went on to 5 hours of this Yom Iyun.
Wow, you're amazing. Okay.
So tonight's podcast is really influenced by what I learned on that Yom Iyun. And they had, most of it was about Judeo-Christian relationships. The first talk was from a Rabbi, Dr. Yaakov Negan, who is a rabbi and a doctor, but he's a director of Or Torah Stone's Institute for Interfaith Dialogue in Beit Medrash. I've actually met him.
He grew up on the Upper West Side. He's a fascinating guy, isn't he?
He is. And he received ordination from RIETS, which is Yeshiva University, and a PhD in Jewish philosophy from the Hebrew University. And he is an expert on Jewish-Muslim relationships. And I'm actually going to play a little snippet from his introduction, because even though the most of what we're going to talk about is Christian-Jewish relationships and how it affects the text of our Parsha and also Bereshit, I think he said something that so resonates with me that I want to play it, and I want to get your response to it. So here we go.
If religion is part of the problem, religion therefore must be part of the solutions in our conflicts. Now, the first part is undeniable. In the genocidal, anti-Semitic atrocities of the Hamas are done in the name of religion. They even called their attack the Al-Aqsa flood. So religion being part of the problem, I think there's a consensus about that. That second step, therefore religion should be part of any solution, that might be more controversial. John Lennon, for example, thought the way to get world peace is by, in his imagine no nations and no religion too. Religion is making so much problems, so let's just get rid of it. But the problem is, first of all, religion and identity are so fundamental, you can't just imagine them to go away. They're a reality. You have to deal with them.
So I have to say, I mean, Rabbi, I am not I wouldn't consider myself a halachic Jew. But I believe that religion, like love, like aesthetics, is part and parcel of the human psyche, and that it can never be ignored, least of all by me. I love it. I love the way that man, women, humankind learns, interacts, and figures out who we are based on how we understand our relationship with something spiritual. But I also believe, as this rabbi just said, that if I was getting a major in political science, if I was going into diplomacy, I think that every diplomat should have a minor in religion. Because it's so clear to me that whatever you call it, whether it's something that we should try to run away from, or it's, as I believe, it's part of our human nature, you can't ignore religion. And it is such, in the words of the Talmud, it is a sam hachayim or it's a sam hamovet. It is either a drug for good or it's a drug for death. And that's one of the things that drives me in my learning on a regular basis, because I really believe that religion and our religion, it's a responsibility. It's important. It has outcomes and it affects the world. Is that how you read what he just said? I mean, do you agree?
I absolutely read it. I mean, he quotes John Lennon, imagine no religion. But, that's the world wouldn't be better with no religion. Religion, like you said, religion makes us who we are, whatever our religion is. And, the question is he said it, how can religion be part of the solution? And, that's a hard thing, because to respect someone else's religion is very, very difficult. To respect their politics, to say that, a group is on a land and therefore that's their land and they can't be thrown out of their land, that's pragmatic. But to accept other people's religion, to imagine that there are different truths, that's a very difficult thing for people.
So one of the lectures that was during this day of learning was from a Rabbi Dr. Martin Lockshin. And the subject of the lecture was Christian influences on Jewish biblical interpretation. And as someone who has a weekly Parsha podcast, I was focused on, was he going to use any verses from our Parsha? And lo and behold, he did.
He did.
And this is a scholar who literally, as per his title, we have many times, as we've studied text, we don't have any parameters. If there is a Christian scholar, whether it's Kierkegaard or whoever, that says something fascinating about a verse or a concept that we're dealing with, it could be a Muslim. We've dealt with very Muslim, how the Quran deals with the Aqidah and other things. We love the fact that our tradition, our scripture is studied by millions, I would say billions of people. But the purpose of his talk was that actually there are Christian influences on great Jewish scholars. So that's how we get to our Parsha. We're in Genesis 49. As I said in the intro, this is the last Parsha in the book of Genesis. And Jacob called his sons and said, "Come together, that I may tell you what is to befall you in the days. Assemble and hearken, the sons of Jacob, hearken to Israel your father." And he blesses Reuben, who was his firstborn. And then he blesses Shimon and Levi. And then in verse 9, he starts talking about Judah, who we all know the tribe of Judah is where King David came from, where the Messiah is understood to come from. So in verse 9, it says, "Judah is a lion's whelp. Oh, pray, my son, have you grown? He crouches, lies down like a lion." This is the Lion of Judah. "Like a lioness, who dares rouse him?" Then in verse 10 it says, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, so that tribute shall come to him until he comes to Shiloh, and the homage of peoples be his." So all of a sudden, it seems that everybody is interested in what this enigmatic reference is until he comes to Shiloh. And that is the title of today's class. So Rashi says, until the King Messiah will come, who will be the kingdom. And thus, too, Rashi continues, does Onkelos render it. A midrashic interpretation is Shiloh is the same as Shiloh, a present unto him. The bottom line is it's one of the many verses that we have where the translation is not altogether clear. We have an enigmatic reference to a word named Shiloh, and Rashi references the Messiah.
Just we have to say one thing. This is poetry, because these are the blessings that Jacob gives to his son. So you're right. It's often in the Torah we don't know what something means, but when it's poetry in every language, poetry always means something beyond what the words themselves mean.
Absolutely. And this particular piece of poetry was captured by the Abraham religions. So if you look at the Latin Vulgate, it says, "The scepter shall not be taken away from Judah, nor a ruler from his thigh, till he comes that is to be sent." So it thinks of Shiloh maybe as there was the scribe missed a Shilach instead of a Shiloh, and he that is to be sent. According to Muslims, they believe that Muhammad is called Shiloh. So lo and behold,
based on this verse.
Yes, absolutely. We have a verse that all three quote-unquote Abrahamic religions are looking at as a prophecy for their particular savior. Now, the scholar that I quoted, this Rabbi Dr. Martin Lakshin, uses this as an example. His belief, he is a scholar in the Rashbam. The Rashbam was the grandson of Rashi, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So he, in his lecture, tried to show where the Rashbam was influenced, was aware, interacted, communicated, engaged with Christian scholarship. So in this particular pasuk, the Rashbam says the exegesis refutes the view of the heretics, especially that of the Christians, who claim that Shiloh, spelt here with a hey at the end, and the city known as Shiloh, spelt in the scripture as Shiloh with a vav, as in Samuel, are not the same. The one same verse. So the point that needs to be made is that the Rashbam is engaged in what typically we would call polemic, which is that he's aware of Christian commentaries on this verse, and he takes pains to explain why they are wrong. But if you want to talk about the beginning of a conversation, the conversation has started. He says, Yaakov, as opposed to the view of the Christians, did not elevate the position of Yehuda to that of being a savior beginning at this point in time, but he predicted on and on. So he brings this verse initially to show that the Rashbam is engaged with Christian interpretations. And he brings actually two other verses from our Parsha that talk about how literally the Rashbam engaged both with Christians and, believe it or not, with his grandfather. One day, my grandchildren will listen to this podcast, and they will learn that the Rashbam talked Torah very, not deferentially, with his grandfather. He says in 49:9 that it says that, and my son Yehuda, seeing that after you have risen from dealing with the spoils, no enemy will dare. He says, all those who understood Yaakov referring as to the sale of Joseph in this verse do not understand the sentence structure nor paid attention to the tone signs. He is referring to his grandfather.
To Rashi, yeah, that's funny.
In 49:9, it says, from the prey, literally tearing, from the deed which I suspected you when I said, Joseph is torn to pieces. He says again, he refers to Rashi and says a difference. So the one thing that this scholar on Rashbam establishes is that, number one, that the Rashbam was aware of other interpretations of the Torah, and two, was not afraid to not only disagree with his grandfather, but to stake his own path. And I've included in the source sheet literally screenshots of the slideshow that...
yeah, it's a great slideshow. That's a great addition.
That this Martin Lachshin sent us. And, you know, Rashbam was 1080 to 1160. And there was a seminary called the Victrines. And he goes at great lengths to show that it's clear that they were influenced by the Rashbam, and the Rashbam was influenced by them. And the source that he brings, since we're ending Genesis, is the story of the three angels that come to Abraham. If you recall, before Sarah and Abraham realize that they can have a child, before the angels go to Sodom and talk about the destruction, and all of the Jewish commentaries are challenged by the fact that the verses start in Genesis 18 by God appeared to him. So God is talking to Abraham, and 3 men who were angels come to him. And then he said to the chief angels, and it goes on. And Rabbi, you and I, we did a whole session on Hachnasat Orchim, on welcoming the guests, because the rabbis learned from here, how can you be talking to God and then turn to 3 men or 3 angels that are coming and tend to their needs? And the Midrash says this is a problem, but it teaches us a profound lesson, which is that accepting and welcoming guests is like being makabel the Shekhinah. But like any great midrash, what it is doing is it's addressing a problem. And the Rashbam looks at this problem, and he makes an absolute radical interpretation, which is that there were 3 angels, and the first angel was called Yud-He-Vav-He, and he stayed with Abraham, and the other 2 angels left. And the reason why it is so radical is obviously we're talking about 3, which reminds us of the Trinity. And Justin Martyr talks about the first angel was an insight or a reflection of God who stayed with Abraham, and the other 2 were reflections of God who left. The point that this scholar made was that the Rashbam may have been influenced or may have seen things in a similar fashion and was not off-put by the interpretations of Christian scholars who were studying the same text and who came to a different solution. It wasn't so much that we Jews leave our God to be accepting of guests. Rather, God was perceived in 3 ways. And his point was, and this was the point of ultimately of his whole discussion, was that we can't always look at when Jewish scholars quote Christian scholars, it's not always polemics. Sometimes it's a conversation, and sometimes as 2 peoples who are infatuated and are focused on the same text, we can learn from each other.
So first of all, again, we'll take each little piece, but on the whole, and I'm sure he talked about this, it's amazing to think about France in the 1100s, when the Rashbam lived and when Rashi lived, the period that he's talking about, because that's during the Crusades. That was a time when Christians would go into Jewish communities, Jewish towns, and they would literally put a knife to the Jews' throat and say, "Convert to Judaism, or we're going to kill you." So on one hand, that's going on, but literally parallel to that, like parallel train tracks, we have conversations going on in the academies between Rashbam and the Christian scholars of Bible. So it's really something amazing to imagine that both of these things are happening at the same time. And the truth is, if we're allowed to take it to modern times, you talk today about all the problems in America and American universities and anti-Semitism and all the terrible things. And then you read articles and things that are going on and conversations and classes that are going on, and how much knowledge is being exchanged and how much Jewish knowledge is being exchanged. You have to understand that sometimes these things can go as parallel train tracks. The fact that there's bad things happening doesn't prevent the good things from happening.
I love the fact that you put it into context. And we are going to end tonight with the ending of Rabbi Yaakov Nagen, who started our conversation about exactly what you're discussing, which is, even though these terrible moments in Jewish-Muslim relationships, there is conversations going on. So I love that you put it into context. But I want to give you the the whole spectrum of what I experienced on Christmas with this Yom HaEyun, there is a very primal, pivotal, seminal thinker, Rabbi Nachum HaMeiri, who is a game changer in relationship to relationships with Christianity and Islam. And he's quoted, but he was, I renewed my interest in him. And Menachem HaMeiri has something to say about every time in the Bible that it talks about Avodah Zarah, which at the end of the day is strange worship, or Avodat Kochavim, worship of the stars. And what he says, and he's not totally unique, Maimonides says similar things, but nonetheless, he is pivotal and a paradigm changer in what he says, is Gedurim B'darchei Hadatot. He establishes a category, and he says that if non-Jews have a religion that is moral and that respects human life and the fact that we are all created in the image of God, that is the most important thing, not the particular variations of how they worship or what they worship or their rituals. And so much of Jewish halakha and Jewish theology prior to him and even after him had been focused on, is there an idol? Is there something that looks like a human being in Christianity? What is the focus of their worship? And he really was a paradigm changer. And he said that really what is important in distinguishing between the them and the us, between the monotheists and the those who in the Bible are characterized as idol worshipers, has less to do with theology and more to do with the way of living in terms of respecting humanity and respecting that humanity is created in the image of God. And one of the speakers, to my absolute wonder and surprise, quoted and says that Rabbi Riskin is one of the foremost scholars who has put forward this, and he has, and it's in the source sheet, says, and therefore, while we can say that Christianity and we can say that Islam in their most classical interpretation are totally within the realm of Meiri's understanding of what acceptable monotheistic religion is, once they cross the border and start killing people and start engaging in terrorism and start lacking that respect for human existence, that's when you draw the line. And it just seemed to me it was so important for our understanding today about who our allies are, who our friends are, where there is potential to move forward, and where the lines are that we can pass.
I couldn't agree more. Again, it's so amazing to take that class of Professor Lukshin and, about Rashbam in the 1100s, and to say that that's exactly what we're talking about today, during this difficult time in Israel. That's an amazing thing, isn't it? But you talked about, the power of religion. That's the power of religion. It's above time. It's relevant always.
And it's a powerful force. That's
powerful
that's
force,
the key.
right.
So the Meiri I had heard of before. What I had not heard of before was the following Rav Yaakov Emden. So in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Father, chapter 4:11, Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler said, every assembly, a kol knesiyah, that is for the sake of heaven, will in the end endure. and every assembly which is not for the sake of heaven will not endure in the end. So I'll be honest with you. I think in the lecture they called machloket, call every argument.
Right.
But it took me a little bit of research to find that Rabbi Yaakov Emden's commentary was not on that verse or that part of the Mishnah Avot, but it was 4:11. This Knisiyah shehi l'shem Shemayim. And Rav Akum Emden comments on the teaching in Pirkei Avot, and he interprets this to refer to Christianity and Islam, who have emerged from us and built their altars on the foundation of our divine religion. Compared with the nations of the world who preceded them, who did not recognize God, their gathering, their knisiot, is considered for the sake of heaven. He places all three faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam into one category by referring to the three us, the three of us, lishaloshtam. He talks about the three datot ha-Elohit. It is amazing to me that you have a Rav Akum Emden is a powerful rabbinic authority, and he saw Pirkei Avot as an argument that is for eternity or for a long time was between the three religions of Abraham. And I had never heard that before, but it is, when this time of year comes, there's a lot of memes going around that say to those who claim that the Jews are colonizers, that Jesus actually was a Jew and he was born in Bethlehem.
Right. There's a lot of that going on.
But the flip part of that is that we Jews at this time of year, and we look to what Judaism spawned and what our tradition spawned, and it spawned Christianity, and it spawned Islam. And you have this Rav Yaakov Emden who talks about that the arguments that we're having have the potential not only to last long, but ultimately, I would hope, to potentially be resolved. I had never heard of this Rav Yaakov Emden before.
Neither have I. That was a great source. This was great. I'm sorry that I didn't listen to those classes because they sound amazing. This was really interesting. And again, we talk about Torah, we talk about Jewish history, but we're really talking about today. So thank you, Geoffrey. Next week, this week, Chazak v'nitchazek, we finish the book of Breshit, and next week we look forward to starting the book of Shmot with you. Next week, Thursday, we're going to do a lunch and learn at 1:00. We can't wait to see everybody.
Fantastic. And as I promised, we were going to end with Rabbi Dr. Yaakov Nagin, who ended his talk by talking about how actually there is a silver cloud, even in these terrible days, when you look in terms of Judaism and Islam. So with your permission, I'm going to go ahead and play that now.
Yes, great.
And with one positive event. A person I've grown very close to recently, Yusuf Ziadin, which you might not have heard of him. He lives in Rahat. Rahat is Israel's largest Muslim city. I'm very close with the Imam of Rahat. And on Friday, Yusuf brought with his minibus people to the party at the Nova party. And he said, I'll pick you up on Shabbat. He heard about when the massacre began, he realized he had to get there fast. He took his minibus, and under very heavy fire, people tried to stop him. He went in, he contacted the people that he was in touch with. He managed to squeeze 30 people into his minibus, and since he's a Bedouin and knows all the side roads, he drove them out. He drove them out through these side roads, managed to save not only the 30 people there, but led a convoy of cars after him. he saved dozens of lives. And as I told him, when I met him, there's a phrase, Sadiq Yisod Olam. And the Mishnah says, if you save a life, it's like you saved the world. They said, you truly are Yusuf HaTzadik. And I was with him again in the city of Rahat, the Imamim of the South, together with a group of Rabbanim. We spent a day volunteering together in the municipality of Rahat with Israeli flags everywhere. We packed half a day, we packed food packages for all the refugees of the area from Otef Aza. Then we did a joint study, and then we were mitpalel together. So yes, the evil is real. It's there. It's demonic. But there are other forces, and we must know to get our victory in a global world, we must know how can we bring reality in a better place in a long process, and maybe end with the words, Am hanetzach lo mefached miderech haruka. The eternal people do not fear a long journey.
And with that, we end this week, and we end the book of Bereshit. So it is a long journey. We do not give up. We continue to learn. We continue to be open, and we look forward to next week beginning the book of Shemot. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Yochanan, how are you today?
Fascinating topic. I put a link in the chat to a non-published article about similar topics. By the way, the Rashbam is fascinating, what you were saying. I wish I would know about this lecture beforehand to be able to join it. If you have a link to it or anything,
I do.
Please. Is it in the Safaria link?
No, I will send you a direct link to that particular lecture. And this is a scholar, literally this Martin Lochshin wrote a whole book on the Rashbam.
Okay, so that would be fascinating because there is other interesting things in Rashbam, in Genesis, heretical taboo stuff that was going on for years. And I already added your Safaria article into my Google Doc that I posted in the chat. Fascinating stuff. And Jacob Emden, Jacob Emden wrote stuff like this more than once, I think in more than one place. And the Haredim today, the ultra-Orthodox, have problems with it. They have issues with it. And some of them try to say that it's not a raya because he had some agenda at his time against the Shabtai Tzvinikas, the Frankists, and that's why he wrote it. But it's fascinating. Thanks for mentioning that. And don't forget that Jacob Emden was not just maybe the biggest Torah giant in his time, but he was also the biggest Kana'i. He was the biggest fundamentalist of the time, and that makes it much more fascinating and surprising.
You know, Yochanan, when I was listening to this and thinking about it, and I remember for a fact that you had referenced the Rashbam, not Rav Yaakov Emden, which I'm surprised to hear, but Rashbam for sure. So thank you for that insight. And it just shows you that we had great scholars who were not afraid of their shadow, who said what was on their mind, and impacted our texts in a way that now, when we look at them, they can give us strength and direction. Thank you so much, Yochanan, and everything else is good with you?
I had my 46th birthday party, and guess what? It was my first birthday celebration in my entire life. Can you believe that?
So what are you saying, that Hasidim don't normally celebrate birthdays?
That's true. Definitely in the community where I grew up, there was no such a thing as birthdays.
I think it's a good thing. I think any celebration is good. need more reasons to celebrate. I mean, here we are. I went to a Yom Ha'iyun on Christmas. That was the excuse, and we study Torah, and we have a new year coming, and all of us, we live in the Western world, and we feel like the year is coming to an end, and you can't get away from that.
In the 2000s, a Hasidic guy, a Haredi guy, published a book about Nittel, and later the rabbi who gave him the Askama, the Hasidic rabbi in New York, retreated from his Askama because the book had some taboo things outside of the some birds in the head, some things outside the box about Nittelnacht, the reason why we don't learn on Nittel, and stuff like this. Yeah, it was. I think it was a hot topic when I still lived in the Hasidic ghetto.
So, what is the shorish for nittel? Is it like nothing? What does nittel mean?
Oh, I think they say that according to what I read many years ago, some say that it has to do with Talia, Tolui, the one who is hanged, the hanged one, and some say it means nital mina olam, like someone who instead of being born in the world, someone who was taken from the world, like netilas yadayim, or notel, what means taken. Yeah, there's different assumptions of there's a discussion of the origin of the word, yes.
One of the things that came up at the very last lecture at this Yom Ha'iyun is the very disturbing trend within the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, Messianic community in Israel. If you recall, about 4 months ago, they actually defaced the church, or they spit at a priest. And it's so strange that these things are rising with where they're going, and he was very disturbed by that.
What do you mean messianic group? You're talking about regular Haredim, right?
Well, I think in this particular instance, it happened in the Old City, and it was a Haredi person who spit on a priest or something.
I think I saw a video clip of it. A few Haredim are doing it. I think I saw in a video clip. Did you see it?
No, but I mean, I think that's exactly what we're talking about. And he was very disturbed by it because all of the trends, whether it's the evangelicals or where we are with the Catholic Church, are moving forward, and this was moving backward.
So that's why I want to publish this article of mine that I posted in the chat. It's not published yet. If you read it, fascinating stuff about the relation between Jews and Christians in the 1500s, both negative and positive, and some partnerships that was going on between them, and the challenging how the limits were challenged, the limits of partnership was challenged. Fascinating stuff that is unknown. It's unknown yet for something that happened in the 1500s. Parts of it is unknown. Okay. So hopefully published.
I just clicked on the Google Docs. I'm going to read it. Yochanan, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Geoffrey. Bye.
Bye.
Good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.